2nd chapter. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Please be seated. So who are these wise men? Or to give them their more correct title, who are these magi? Well, notwithstanding the beloved hymn we are about to sing in a couple of minutes, they are not kings. Though in fact they may well have been in the service of kings. They aren't kings though. Best we can tell, magi were something like astrologers. Maybe even they were a kind of scientist, but almost certainly they were a type of priest. What they did was they studied the heavens, because they believed that the future could be found in the stars. Thank goodness nobody thinks that today. Checked your horoscope lately? Yeah. They believed the stars foretold the future, and they believed that the stars foretold what would happen in your life, and they believed that the stars foretold what would happen in terms of important events. For example, the birth of a new king. So the idea of these magi following a star to find a new king is not actually all that crazy when you think about it from their terms. It's what they did. It's the kind of life that they led, and it was the way they lived out their calling. Like I said, they're astrologers. They're stargazers. But they're also priests. What they are not, in any way, shape, or form, is Jewish. They are foreigners. Matthew tells us they come from the East, which in all likelihood, almost certainly, means that they have come from Persia. Modern-day Iran. In Jesus' day, Persia was the big giant empire east of the Roman Empire. It was the other big player in the known world of Jesus. So they come from far away, and they are Gentiles. As astrologers, they practice an art that Judaism condemns. Judaism condemns all forms of divination, like looking at the stars or looking at animal insides or reading tea leaves or anything like that. It is an abomination to Israel to do such a thing. It is forbidden in the law of Moses. So regarding the law, these magi are serious outsiders. They are priests too, so they are not Jewish priests. What are they? Well, they would be priests of a religion called Zoroastrianism. No, I'm not telling you all about that this morning. You're in luck. But Zoroastrianism was the official main religion of Persia. It still exists today. You can find Zoroastrians over there in Iran and elsewhere in the Middle East, and even here in the United States. There are Zoroastrians. But because they are Zoroastrians, they are really extreme outsiders to the people of Israel. And yet, Matthew tells us that they are the ones who are paying attention to this star. They are the ones who are following the star. They are the ones who are joyfully seeking a newborn king. They are the ones who are genuinely excited by the news of Jesus' birth. They are. Not Herod, and not his priests, and not his scribes. These magi show us that the good news of Jesus' birth is actually good news for all people, not just a select insider few. The outsiders are welcome as well, even those who don't fit our rules, who don't fit our styles or our ways of thinking and behaving. Even magi are welcome to come and worship. Which means we need to ask ourselves a question this morning. Who are we excluding? Who do we think don't belong here? Who should we be reaching out to? These magi are risk takers too. It is a long way from Persia to Bethlehem, especially when you detour to Jerusalem on the way. It would be a slow trip. They would be traveling by camel. Isn't that a wonderful image, though, in the other reading will be covered by herds of camels? You ever want to think about yourself under a camel? Now, I know, the Bible has images like that, doesn't it? It's like they just put these images, they deal with that. Camels were a sign of wealth. Camels were a sign of power and prestige. So they would travel by camel herd. And they would not be traveling lightly. They would be traveling with an entourage of servants and disciples and guards and whoever else wanted to tag along with them on this adventure. And it would not be a safe trip either. Travel in the ancient world was risky in any number of ways. You could be attacked by bandits. Happened all the time. You could get caught in storms. You could be traveling through the territory of a king or a prince who was hostile to you and maybe didn't like you, and so they may send their soldiers to take you into custody. Wild animal attacks were happening all the time. Bears, lions, all manner of creature could jump on you from nowhere. Injuries could happen in any number of ways. Who knows what else could go wrong? It's a risky thing to travel a long way. But they get there, and they meet the baby Jesus, and then they take the biggest risk of all. They diss Herod. Herod's nuts. Herod is insane. Herod murders his own family for ticking him off. Herod will murder all of the children in Bethlehem just to try to get rid of Jesus. You don't want him mad at you. He has a short temper. And he will not take kindly to these magi ignoring his order to come back and tell him about Jesus. They have endured great risk. It is no easy thing for them to travel to Jesus. It is no easy task to follow a star to tell them they don't know where they're going. They don't really know what they'll find when they get there, but they believe the risk is worth it. The star tells them that whatever else, good news awaits them when they get there if they are willing to take the risk to go. Which means we need to ask ourselves another question. What are we willing to risk to worship and follow Jesus? What chances are we willing to take? What obstacles will we strive to overcome? These magi follow a star. More precisely, they see a star and they head towards where they think it is. But literally, they see the light and they move towards it. not the most precise way to travel, you know. If you get in your car after worship, turn on your GPS and plug in "follow a star," I doubt you will get anywhere. But it's a star. It's a light in the sky, but to them it's good news. To them it's blessing. To them it's hope. And so they set off to find this light. They are led by this divine light regardless of where it will take them. They just follow the light. Which means we need to ask ourselves another question. Are we willing to follow God's divine light wherever it leads us? Maybe we need to ask another question too. How are we going to be a star? How are we going to shine the light of God's love into other people's lives? How are we going to be the light of God that leads other people to faith? How are we going to be the light that shines into other people's darknesses to bring them the light of God's love? And finally, the Magi are gift givers. They offer gifts to the baby Jesus when they get there, and you know them: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Folks, these are not trivial gifts. These are expensive gifts. These are even rare gifts. Myrrh, I learned, is only made from one plant that only grows in one place on earth. And it's the resin of that plant that makes the myrrh. That's rare. This is priceless stuff. This is stuff they ought to be offering to Herod, not Jesus. But they give the gift to Jesus. And you know, we remember that gift giving every December 25th when we give gifts to one another. We do it because the Magi brought gifts. They risk a lot to get there. And they give very expensive gifts when they find Jesus. Which means we need to ask ourselves yet one more question today. What gifts of real value are we willing to present to Jesus? What are we willing to give of ourselves? Are we willing to give our time? Are we willing to give our talent? Are we willing to give our treasure? Are we willing to give our very selves? Not the gift of ease and convenience, not the gift that costs us nothing. Are we willing to give the gift that costs us something? The gift that is actually a sacrifice. What gift do we bring? They teach you in preaching class to never end a sermon with a question. So I won't. I'll give you a statement. However you answer the questions I have asked you today, God is always faithful to you. God is always present with you. God is always loving you. God is always giving you grace. God's acceptance of you as you are, whoever you are, does not depend on what you have done or what you are doing now or what you will be doing later on. God's light will always shine in your life. God's light will always shine in your darkness. God's light will always overcome and dispel your darkness, always. God is always with us. God is always with you. Always. What we do in response to the questions I have posed to you today, we do as a loving response to what God has already done for us. And we do it as a loving response for what God is always doing for us and will continue to always do for us. The question is, are you willing to make that response today? Amen.